Was written even in the 3rd, 4th centuries. Surprising maybe to you to hear that there are not only 4 Gospels that were ever written.
No, there are more.
There are many more Gospels. I know about 43 Gospels. If I'm not mistaken by the number now, 40. Over 40 Gospels. Gospel of the Ebionites, Gospel of the Nazarenes, Gospel of the Egyptians, Gospel of St. Thomas. Many Gospels which has not made itself into the New Testament. But people wrote about these Gospels. What are they? What Jesus did, what he said, how he acted, what he preached, and so on. So when we examine the New Testament believed by the Christians with the 4 Gospels, what do we find? We find Jesus Christ is saying things here and there. So we have to examine this because a lot of people have written about them. Are they writing this in truth, without any exaggerations, without any things that have been added in to make it fantastical? For example, one of the Gospels, called Gospel of Matthew, I want to share this because it's very important to know why we have to approach in this way. Before that, let me give an example. Suppose now a dinosaur, Tyrannosaurus Rex. Do you know dinosaurs? Yeah. Came up from the ground there, from that park, from the ground, and roaring it just, walked around this, and in this process, many of the people got stampeded and under his feet, died. And guess what? Even though with all these cameras around, no one reported this event. Not a single person, you and me, went to our homes because we survived that incident and told our friends in our Facebook, Twitter, whatever it might be, social media that you use. None of us reported this event. Only one person, this gentleman, for example. Now, would you consider that story believable? You would say there's something fishy going around. Such an event of this magnitude, a dinosaur going around in 21st century, you would say everyone's going to report it. Many people. Now, compare this. Now, compare this to one of the New Testament writing. It describes how during the so-called alleged crucifixion of Jesus, the graves were opened up of many saints. And the dead saints came over the ground, and this is in the Gospel of Matthew, and they appeared to many people, multitudes. Now, such an event of this magnitude, if you were there, saints, right? It could be someone's brother, someone's uncle, someone's dad, someone's grandfather.
Yeah, but that's a parable, though.
Yeah,
that's a parable.
So
Jesus said, give it in parables.
So listen, what I'm saying is, that description, that historical or so-called event is only narrated by one writer called Matthew. We don't even know his second name. None of the other people, none of the other gospel writers who are believed to be, authentically transmitting the gospel, the other 3, none of the Jewish authors, historians, or the Romans authors, historians, no people narrated this. Only one individual. You would say, as you said already, it's very unlikely to be true because such an event to be narrated. So now if you question this writing in the New Testament, if an event like this is narrated by this individual, how much is he actually inventing? Because it looks like some kind of concoction to make something wonderful.
That could be the same.
It's the moral of the story.
Yeah, but is it true though? Is it true? Is it true? You can speak to my friend over there. Do you want to take him to our side?
No, I'm going to give me getting involved.
The reason why he wants to interrupt this discussion is because let's carry on because we can have a
getting involved. Exactly, great.
Okay, so
no, don't worry. I'm going to help you out.
Right.
It works both ways.
So as you realize, we have a text called the New Testament, and within this we have writings. An author is writing something which you think is fishy, because it doesn't sound to be historical, because if it was true, you would expect a lot of people narrating this magnificent, huge event of this magnitude. What else do we know about him? For example, at the very beginning, this gentleman, this writer, describes the genealogy of Jesus Christ, and he gives the list. And I'll tell you why this is very important, because we can now assess the character of this individual and to see whether his writing is worthy to be believed in or not. He says, these are the generations from Abraham to David, from David to the exile to the Babylon, and then to Jesus. 3 lots of 14 generations. He says, these are all the generations 14, 14, and 14. Guess what? We know this is totally incorrect. How do we know this? Because he is describing people of the Old Testament. And when we go to the Old Testament, like in the books of Chronicles, chapter 3, verse 10 onwards and so on, we find the same individuals there narrated, father to son to grandson and so on. And we discover he's omitting certain people. Now, you might think he's omitted to make a fantastic number, to make a 14 as a magical number. But guess what? The people he omits, like he omits a person called Jehoiakim, an individual called Jehoiakim. What's so special about him? Actually, he's a key figure because this author, Matthew, he makes Jesus Christ the descendant of David, right? He wants Jesus to be sitting on the throne of David. So he gives the line of David through his progeny. Within this line, Jehoiakim is one individual God cursed, and God said, you and your descendants are all cursed. You shall have none to sit on the throne of David. So if Jehoiakim was there within this line, within this genealogy, then you cannot claim to sit on the throne of David. So he takes that name away. So he takes that name away. Do you follow? He takes that name away so that he's trying to fit Jesus on this line. But we know the dishonesty, that he is twisting history. He is changing history for his theological motive. So I've given you two examples. I can carry on and on. Two examples to show that these writings cannot be believed on. We cannot believe. Because how can we trust the author when their character is in question?
You're saying that the generations from the Old Testament were rewritten again in the New Testament.
That's a claim.
Yes.
But trying to say that it only happened in the New Testament and never happened in the Old
No.
Testament.
He changed the genealogy to fit his theories. And because he changed what is already there, he can't change the historical writings. The writings in Chronicles are still available. And when we check the writings, we can see which name he has removed. And we know the name he has removed is very significant. Because if that name was there in Matthew's genealogy, Jesus cannot be the son of David.
That's a period of 42 years or not? No. 14, 14 and 14.
No, there are three sets of 14.
To Adam, it's
Within-
6,000 years.
Yeah,
Within-
According to the Bible.
He's talking about
Can you
14.
name
No, he doesn't know what he's talking
every
about.
single person?
He doesn't know what he's talking about.
From
The
Jesus
14 generations.
Can you name
Just
Jesus
get
to
me a
Adam?
Bible, I will show
can't
you in
name
the Bible.
You could never name.
Could someone get me a physical
people
Bible?
over 6,000
How many
years.
years in each generation?
6,000 years we name it over.
From
How
this,
many years in each generation?
6,000 years.
no, it's between
name
father and
everyone.
son. Father and son. So we're talking about what?
How many years?
No. When we say
6,000 years.
this generation,
According to the Bible.
it's not like more than 100 years, is it? Right? So 14
back
generations.
then was what, 50 years? 60
Could be.
years?
Can I? Thank you. I'll show you. There you go. Here's the Bible. Very interesting.
Matthew, it says, Jesus
And how
begat
long
all
was
the
there
way to
the
Adam.
Old Testament and the New Testament.
Here it is.
He
Now-
says, he begat all the way to Adam. Yes?
No, you're mistaken. I'll
Right,
show you.
all the way to Adam.
Since you don't know what you're talking about,
Right?
let me
All
continue.
the way to Adam. And after that, I want to ask him,
how old-
how did Islam begin? That's a question I want to ask you.
Let him finish this
Please.
topic.
This is a record. This is the Holy Bible, right?
Just jumping from one.
Book of Matthew. This is the first book of the New Testament. The record of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. So Abraham was the father of Isaac. Isaac is the father of Jacob. So now you're talking about the father and son business, right? All the way goes on. And it talks about here. Thus there were 14 generations in all. From Abraham to David. So from Abraham to David, there were not 15 generations. Matthew says 14. And from 14 from David to the exile to Babylon, and 14 from the exile to the Christ. 3 lists of 14s. Matthew makes it no more than 14 in all. But we know this is false historically, because when we go in the genealogies here in the Old Testament, in 1 Chronicles, if you have time, maybe you can bring up 1 Chronicles 3:16 and we read side by side. And we will discover the names that he has changed them. The names are here, all the names. He changes the name, not just one, many. So this is example number 2. The example number 3 is even very nearby. He invents a prophecy. He says, and Jesus Christ, who was prophesied in the past that he shall be called a Nazarene. You can read the whole Old Testament from cover to cover, from beginning to end. You will never find this prophecy in the Old Testament that he was prophesied by the prophets that the Messiah will be called a Nazarene.
No.
Doesn't exist.
Listen,
So what Matthew is doing, he's inventing, he's fabricating, he's distorting, he's concocting.
I'm dealing with this.
So
One at a
when
time.
you read today, in 2,000 years afterwards,
One at a time.
which is going to supposedly guide you to the truth,
You can ask
and
me
you
the question.
realize this author is doing all of these things, you will say, this doesn't seem to be an author who is a man of integrity. I cannot trust his writings. I cannot trust his writings. You can examine all the books likewise, right? Yeah. So this is what we're saying is, what we believe as Muslims, this book narrates about stories of the prophets, and it adds and takes away and distorts, and it, does all these embellishments. There are some truth, but there are also falsehood. And the Quran says the Quran came as a muhaiminan, as a criterion to witness and testify the truth and falsify the falsehood. The Quran came as a guardian and say, look, all people of the scripture, come, let us reason together. As I said earlier, let us come to a common ground, that we worship none but God, and we do not take partners besides God along with him, and we do not say God is Jesus, or in fact the Quran says certainly they disbelieve who say God is a Trinity. Desist, it is better for you, for your God is one. And it talks about how Jesus, in fact, you'd be surprised to know in the Quran there's a chapter called Mary, by name of the mother of Jesus, in the Quran, and it describes how Jesus is born. When Mary was pregnant and she brought the baby to the people, how do you think she defended herself? Can you imagine? Do you know what she said in the Quran? فَأَشَارَتْ إِلَيْهِ. She just pointed to the baby, and the people said, how can we speak to someone who is in the cradle? How can we speak to a baby? The baby Jesus spoke. And he says, I am a slave of God. God made me a prophet and blessed me and made me not so unrighteous to my mother, and so on. Because the baby Jesus spoke, they knew that Mary was a chaste woman.
12. That happened when he was 12.
In the Quran.
When he was 12 years of age,
Yeah.
he was taken, and they witnessed him.
But the
saying it
Quranic
back.
story-
But when he was a baby, he was 12.
Yeah, but the Quranic
12
story,
years of age.
it gives you
That's
the
story.
But the Quran gives you the story that happened in reality. That's how Jesus, as a baby, and his mother was removed from these accusations of improper conduct, being unchaste. If that miracle didn't happen, how do you think Mary would have been removed from this accusation? By just saying, God gave me a child? Who would have believed like this, like that? If you now come to...
It stated that Jesus was 12 years of age when he said that he was a slave or messenger.
We have to be very wary of what we read now. As you realize, whatever we read in the Bible, we have to think twice.
I don't know
Are
what
the-
chapter it is, but it's
Yeah.
in the same.
Yeah, so we have to think twice what we
It's
read.
the same
In
applies to
the,
the
in,
Quran.
the, in the
Because
Quran,
ask him how it started.
in the Quran,
I'm waiting for.
do you have? I need a Quran, please.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
please, get the
In
Quran.
the
How did it start?
Quran, God says, "Look,
How did it start?
this is a book in which there's guidance for sure,
it didn't say that.
without a doubt.
Can you show me how
A
it started?
guidance for those who are God-fearing,
Quran start?
righteous. This is exactly what we expect from a book. Yeah. So when the Quran describes to,
No one here with a
it
Quran.
speaks to you, to your heart and your mind, and
It doesn't speak to anybody. Can we have ask him for the beginnings of the Quran?
look,
Just ask the beginning. How did it start?
He'll get to it. Let him finish one topic.
this book,
This is just preaching, isn't it?
no, this book has
preaching.
no doubt in it,
talking
a
to
guidance for the God-fearing.
There's no proof it came from Allah. This book. No proof whatsoever.
Now let's discuss this.
There's no proof.
No,
He doesn't believe in
it's an interesting,
He's an atheist.
interesting.
I would like you to address this gentleman.
There's no proof it came from Allah.
We have spoken with him
It didn't come
before.
from Allah. Let's break that down.
He believes in things. He doesn't believe in any of the scriptures. So that's why this discussion
in the truth.
is not like
I believe in the
meaningful here. He doesn't believe.
That
In fact,
debunks you every single week.
we have spoken,
So
and he knows that very well. So what I would like you to, because you said logic. The moment you said logic, I knew you are a person who thinks and reasons and who wants to not just believe because you are born into a family, but you would understand and try to weigh the evidence.
to you.
So when we examine, for example, the life of the Prophet ﷺ, for 40 years in his life, do you know what people what they said about this man? Muhammad, peace be upon him.
We don't know.
For 40 years.
It's hearsay. We don't know.
It's not an exact.
For 40 years, before he received any
He
revelation,
didn't receive any revelation.
they called him as-sadiqul amin,
There's no
the
revelation.
truthful one,
No,
the
I'm going by your
trustworthy one.
book. I'm going
He
by
was known,
no revelation.
established
No
in his
revelation.
community
There's
to be
no
a truthful
revelation.
person and a
None.
trustworthy person.
No revelation.
They did not ever even hear
No revelation.
any lies from him,
This Gabriel here.
only mistrust from him. So this was a man for 40 years like
All
this,
hearsay.
right? So when he received revelation,
Always present.
Yes, and that's why
he didn't realize
that's why the
that.
bag green.
He's saying it's
That's why the
Yeah, of course, I was going to be a prophet. I knew it all along.
What happens to Superman?
He was like trembling. What happened to him? He was trembling like this, right?
Not when
He came to his wife, said, "Wrap me up, cover me up, cover me up."
He can't fly no more.
What has happened to him? She described, and he described.
Let's get back into this.
You know what has happened? He didn't know what was happening to him. So it's not like an imposter saying, "Oh yeah, yep, God has made me a prophet."
A story that begins.
This is how it is.
Time,
So
they lived their man.
he is not someone that is making things up. So when
you're preaching, I don't mean to mess up your camera time, but this is pure preaching.
So when he went to his people, like at the time there was a custom. If there was an urgent emergency of some kind,
Once upon
they will go in top of the mountain and give a call like Ya Sawaha, for example.
says who?
People will leave and abandon everything and they'll run to this place like
And you was there.
just like even a few hundred years ago in this country and
was there.
others, people used to ring ding 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 the bell like, and people will leave everything and join them because that's how the whole community will come to help. So he did this, Ya Sawaha. People came running and he says, "Look, what if I tell you that there is an army waiting behind the mountains to attack you? Would you believe me?" Do you know what the people said? He says, "We would believe you because we have never heard any lies from you." The people testified about him, and they says, "Look, I'm asking you, I'm telling you that worship God alone, that there is only one God worthy of worship. You should worship none else. Abundance and
Which
shun
God?
and reject
But which
the
God?
false gods,
Yeah, but
the
which
gods,
God? Which
false
God?
gods."
Yeah, but
Yep.
which one? Allah.
So this
We've
was
got
his
Yahweh,
call. This was
we've got
his call.
Rima,
So
we've got so many
when we
gods. Which
examine
God are
the
we
life,
worshipping?
You believe in
Is-
Which one? Which one
see,
are we worshipping here?
he was inviting
Yes, which one?
people
Yeah, but which are the ones
to worship one God, not to worship deities that they made with their own hands, they carve with their own hands.
Worship yourself. Honor and love yourself.
Worship the moon,
and
the
love
sun,
yourself.
the stars,
To that
the
point,
stone.
to that point
Yes,
what you just made,
because
they
that's the
had
only proof you
access
have,
to
it's yourself.
different
This
things.
invisible
People
God
in
you're talking
another
about, there's no
country
proof for it.
had access to the same as we find in
The source.
Earth.
No,
We
but
have
your
different
source,
materials
but your source
than
starts with
Africa.
other sources.
They
I have to go
have
your
access to
source.
things we don't have.
Right now, my
So
source
therefore,
states.
what is
Okay,
around
no,
them
not tomato
is
sauce.
a different-
And what is that? We can bring in jokes if you want, because your story is a joke.
Yeah. So
I'm
what?
saying your story does not begin. I'm not. Look at my face. You know I never.
Interestingly, though, when the Prophet, when the Quran asked
I'm
them,
you distracted me from this.
who created all of this? They said God, Allah. They believe, but what did the Arab society at that time?
Country and they say this is what we call it.
Yes.
They say to be another
Exactly.
language.
But what-
There's
You
all-
can't tell
It's
them they're wrong.
No,
subjective.
what we are saying is this: how God is correcting
This is
us
all
in our mistake is this.
subjective.
God is saying, look, when people are asked
all
who created
subjective,
this, and you say God,
I keep
then
believing
God is
Harry
saying,
Potter.
then why do you set up partners
what's
with
going on?
him? Why do you worship an elephant with him alongside
I
as
keep
well?
believing Harry Potter. What's wrong with you
Reject
guys?
setting up partners and
The
worship
answer
God
is
alone.
yourself. It's the only
So
proof you have.
even in different
Right?
places
Yeah,
and
yeah.
different
There's
countries,
There's no proof
We had different
that
animals.
any
So,
God
do you know what the Quran
created-
says?
God
So we
created- you know
have
what the
our
word created
animals,
means?
you have your animals.
What's the word
They
created
have
mean?
kangaroos in
What's it
Australia.
would we worship a kangaroo?
Person or thing that
Should we worship a
They
kangaroo?
have a kangaroo in Australia.
Yeah.
So is
I can't
Allah
say to
a
him-
personal thing?
I'm more
You're
like-
using the definition I'm giving you.
Should we worship a kangaroo? Say we were in Australia.
Show me where it says that.
Right.
Show me in the Quran where it
Right.
says.
So you and I will realize if we used our intellect,
Show me where it says.
our logic, our rationality,
definition.
we would not we shouldn't worship anything of the creation, because
Does he say
every
that he's
thing
the
of the
creator?
creation is
Does Allah
limited,
say that he's
finite,
the creator?
dependent. All of these are creation,
no?
not worthy of worship.
Yes or no?
This is what the message of the Quran is. And the Quran says, look, God sends prophets and messengers to all nations.
No.
He doesn't
Does
punish a
Allah
nation
describe himself as
until
the creator?
He sends a messenger,
Does he
a
describe
prophet,
himself as
telling
the
them what is required
Does
of
he
them.
describe himself as a creator?
Otherwise, God will be unjust by punishing someone who worships a kangaroo.
But you're
They
distracting
will say,
me.
look, you didn't tell me.
And I know you.
God, you didn't tell me that you
Let me
shouldn't be
deal with
worshipping a
this when I
kangaroo.
come. You know, I
God
know you
tells us He
distracted
sent
me.
many prophets and messengers,
Oh, wait a second.
and He never punished a
I
nation
know. I'll deal with it in a minute.
for their misbehaving,
Concentrating on this.
for their worshipping wrongly,
This is so much lying.
until He sends
So
a
much
messenger.
rhetoric, and you won't
So,
engage because he knows.
When at the time of
No,
Moses,
he's preaching to her.
Moses came, He told the people
She said
to
she's
worship
not
God.
knowledgeable in the subject.
So his message that he brought was the message of submission and surrender to God. In Arabic, it's called Islam.
I've dealt with him already.
When he said, I surrender myself to God and I worship Him alone, in Arabic, it's called, he is a Muslim.
I've debated with him.
Jesus did the same thing. When He came to this earth, He invited people to say, you should worship God
Before
alone.
you make that justification, you have to
was a
agree
really
with
good
other
debate.
people
I've seen Sarah
places
and,
before you can
Hamza
accept
debate.
them.
That
They
was
say,
a
hold
Yes,
on,
but
we need
me and him,
to
who's all
know
over.
facts.
that
But
he
we
got
need to
destroyed in
establish
Noah.
that for ourselves. Don't just tell us that it's the truth.
Yes, Jason.
Before
We only convey.
for ourselves.
You're right. We can only convey to them the message. They have to understand and accept. You cannot force them. Look, if you put a gun on my head,
The way you teach has to be.
if you put a gun on my head and say, believe God is a monkey.
Every single person
Now,
dealt with.
if I'm so weak, I might just say I believe, but in my heart, you would know that I would never believe in that.
Absolutely
With what they
destroyed.
know, to just say, right, I'll
Yes,
forget
I do.
everything know.
But you guys
Because I
being.
see
Sarah
you might
making
not
comments,
be
so
at the same
as long
time
as he
as
gets
they
upset,
do.
that's all right.
Yeah, but I don't
So
go
you don't know
as
what
you know.
they've experienced.
You don't take that serious. This is a picture
And they
show.
might have great experience.
You got the kryptonite.
That's different
Yes.
from yours.
But what we're saying is,
So you can't force somebody
It does
to
work.
take
My
your
friend,
views
it works
based
every
on
week.
what it says in the book.
but I want to clarify one point though. The Quran,
Talking about personal
you see,
experience.
as Muslims, Islam is not a new religion. It may come surprising to
It
you.
turns out, you like Superman.
Islam is not a new religion.
What's Superman?
The first man God
What happened to
created,
Superman? What
Adam,
happened to Superman? What happened to him?
was a Muslim, and he came with Islam.
No,
That's what we believe.
Only
Every
has gone
prophet,
away.
every messenger that went to all these nations, they brought the same message of worshiping one God alone. That message of Islam.
Wait till I go.
Islam today, with the last prophet, I've given you away the clue. The last prophet. We believe that, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the last and final of all the prophets and
Hearsay.
messengers.
That's all hearsay.
That's the difference.
That's all hearsay.
His message is no different from any of the prophet's message that God is one and should be worshipped alone.
What religion was there in the time of the Old Testament?
Okay,
The Abrahamic religion.
let's establish that. When you talk about Abrahamic, we can establish that.
No. Shall I ask
What
you
was the
question?
religion of Abraham?
Shall I ask you the correct
What is the
question?
religion of Abraham?
Shall I ask you the correct question to ask him?
Okay.
What was Muhammad? No, hold on a second, madam, listen to me. Ask him.
Abraham-
What was Prophet Muhammad's first name? Ask him what it was.
Muhammad's first name?
What was his first name? What was Muhammad's first name?
I told you, he has many names.
But what was one of the names?
He is Muhammad ibn Abdullah,
Okay, and Abdullah means. Ask him what Abdullah means.
What's Abdullah mean?
servant or slave of Allah.
Right. And
So
hold on
Allah
a
is
second.
not a new
So hold
concept.
on a
And
second.
do you get this concept from when Jesus Christ was born and he said this in the cradle, because we know that he said it at the age of 12 years of age. 12 years
The
old,
description,
this is when Jesus
the description I gave you about the story of the birth of Christ,
you're missing
the
that
birth of Christ
Allah
comes
at the time of
from
Muhammad. Listen.
the
The one
Quran.
God
You're
worship
listening?
was not around when Muhammad was born. When Muhammad was born, they had many gods, and the head of that God was Allah. So at the time that Muhammad was born, he was named after a pagan god. There was no one God when
Correct
Muhammad was
the gentleman
born.
here.
Am I correct? or
Allah
not?
was never a pagan god. In fact, the Quran tells you, as I
wasn't a
spoke to
pagan
very
god.
clearly, who do you think created all of this? They said Allah.
Allah at the time.
Yep. So Allah
The
is a
God-
name
there was
of
no
God.
one God system at the birth
Even
of
the
Muhammad.
Arabic
Yes or no?
speaking Christian,
Yes or no?
Arabic speaking
Yes
Jew
or no?
would call
Was there
upon.
one God
Because
at the birth
that is
of
the name in
Muhammad?
Arabic,
No.
Allah. So when you ask a
Muhammad
Christian
was the one
who's
that came up with the
Arab,
one God concept.
who is Allah? Allah is God.
Stop making up stories.
They don't say this is a pagan God.
Use your own
So you asked a very,
logic.
very
Don't
important
use my
question
logic.
about the Abrahamic religion.
Think about it.
So let's talk about the
If Muhammad is
founder of
named
Abrahamic
after
religion,
Abdullah,
Prophet Abraham
And
himself.
there's no one God at the time.
What was the name of his religion?
Prophets came with one God.
No, they didn't.
Okay.
The Arabs at the time had
The Bible doesn't say.
60 gods.
So the Bible is not going to help us because the Bible
think
does
about
not
it.
tell us
Abdullah,
the
who
name
is this God?
of the religion
Who is this
of Abraham.
God is named after?
But it does describe
Think about
what
it.
he
Think about
believed
it.
about
There's no
God.
one God at the time of Muhammad's
What
birth.
was his relationship with his God? It describes that Abraham, Prophet Abraham, peace be upon him, believed in one and only God. And he sincerely and willingly surrendered his will to the will of this one true God and worshipped him without ascribing any partners to God. So if Abraham
I'm dealing with this.
believes in one and only God
One minute.
and worships this one and only God. In Arabic, we say this is known as a person who does that. They're called a Muslim, and their religion is Islam.
Give me 15 minutes.
So we know from the actions
I'm here.
of Abraham that he was a Muslim. He was calling to Islam.
You got a funny face.
That is why the Quran says, "Oh people, why do you argue about Abraham when Judaism, Christianity, all of this came after him? This is after him. Judaism came after the name of Judah, right? Christianity came with the name after Christ, but Abraham was all before. He was neither a Jew or a Christian. The Quran says that he was not a Jew or a Christian, but a Muslim Hanifan, a fully
Not going to convert
directing
today.
himself to the worship of one God.
Christ is actually Messiah.
She's not going to convert.
You'd be surprised to hear.
She's not going to convert.
I watch a funny film today, but I guess I'll settle with that.
That's the name of Christ.
Did you know that we believe that Christ is the Messiah?
The Messiah.
The Quran establishes that. In fact, the Quran, when it talks about Isa, it says
But the Quran says the
Al-Masih
Messiah didn't
Isa.
die.
The Quran talks about the Messiah
Jesus died on the cross.
is
Died on the
Jesus.
cross, yes, according to the Bible. Why did it say he
Come on,
didn't?
let's talk about your attitude.
So
why did it say he didn't?
we find the Quran agrees that the Jesus Christ is the Messiah. Now the question is, what is the Messiah? Rather than saying who, because we know who, it's Jesus. But what is it? What is being a Messiah?
Mentioned 25 times.
So when we
The
go,
Bible said
we
Jesus died on
find
the cross.
the Messiah is a concept that is
So is the Quran.
found
So
with
is the
the
Quran
Jewish
concept.
people.
So is
The
the
Jewish
Quran concept.
people were expecting a Messiah to come. To them, a Messiah is going to be a political deliverer, a human being like Moses, who would come and deliver the people from the oppression and the bondage of the systems and establish peace on earth. This Messiah is not God. They never believed that he was God. No, no. The Jewish people never believe the Messiah is God. They believe the Messiah will be sent by God.
They had no idea what was going on the other side of the world
No,
at
no,
the time,
please.
so it wasn't for peace
Look,
on earth, it was for
before,
peace around
do you
us.
agree? Do you agree? Before the Christians came, they didn't have the Messiah concept. Messiah concept was with the Jewish people.
Christian.
So the Jewish people
Come on.
are in a position to tell us what they understood to be what the Messiah is.
You believe white
So
people
to them, Messiah is
Don't you, Gary?
God sent.
Don't you believe white people
God sent. So the God sends the Messiah, a human
The
being.
black man.
Don't you, Gary?
So, we've got
So
equal
we
balance
believe
now.
Jesus was that human being
Balance now.
who came.
I'm listening to the words.
So
Did he send or did he
Listening to the
work for
words.
them?
sorry,
Listen to
Sent
the
or he
words.
worked for them?
I can't hear too much.
Did he send-
Can you tell him to move away a little bit? I can't hear you.
Did he send or did he work?
No, I'm not asking you to be loud. Just ask him to be.
No, you can hear me. Did he send or did he work?
I am not from the
God
nation of Islam.
sent the Messiah.
How did he send?
Yeah, I'm not from the nation of Islam.
Okay, how-
you guys got me wrong.
Okay, I'll tell you how he sent.
You
God,
got misquote. Listen.
when Mary
Listen.
didn't have a child,
I'm going
God
to do you
said,
libel.
to Mary. B, and Mary was pregnant.
I have the power.
That's how God created Mary. How did God create Adam?
How did he work
got 1 week to show me.
Why did he
I
not work
never
through
once
him?
said white people were the devil.
Jesus was not created.
No.
He always existed.
God created Adam from the dust. Adam was still lifeless.
Be
So
careful
God
what you do for
breathed into Adam.
I have the power to do
Breathed
it
into
for life.
Adam
was created.
and said, "Be."
Jesus was not
And
created.
Adam was.
He always
Now,
existed.
this is the creation
It says before Abraham,
of
ego I
Adam.
me. He was
The
always existed.
Quran describes the similitude, the example of Jesus is like Adam.
No, it's not.
When God created Adam from
Jesus
dust,
is the one that
God
created
said,
Adam.
"Be," and he was. This is how Jesus was created.
No, Adam was
So God
created out of
created
mud.
Jesus.
Jesus always existed.
So he's a creation of God. So when Jesus came, what did he tell people? Worship me. Do you find a single statement in the Bible where Jesus said, "I am God and worship me"?
Jesus was worshipped. He never stopped there.
Ask him. Ask him.
Jesus
No,
was
ask him.
worshipped.
Please.
He was
It's
worshipped.
important to ask the gentleman who believes in Christianity.
Yeah, he was
Just
worshipped.
ask
He
him.
never stopped there.
Show us a statement in black and white where Jesus says, "I am God and worship me."
It didn't say that in the Bible. It
See?
doesn't say that.
No.
I am God,
He was
worship me.
worshipped, but he never
It doesn't
stopped
say
there.
I am God, worship me.
Now, do you
It doesn't say
realize
that.
they admit that Jesus made no such claims?
No, you're getting no.
Do you
That's my
know?
word.
Do you know? Realize?
Jesus was worshipped, but he never stopped him.
Yeah, but you don't believe Jesus was God, do you?
Jesus
So as you,
So what's your point?
so as you realize,
The Bible
believe
says
Jesus
it.
was God. Yeah, exactly. So
as you realize,
you're
as you
talking to a
realize,
Christian.
Jesus
was not God.
at one point,
Tell that to him.
it's okay,
Jesus
it's
said
okay.
he wasn't God.
At one point,
Jesus was sent to the Gentiles.
at one point,
I already dealt with that.
you know what was
I already
happening?
dealt with that. You can't
He was
do
sitting-
your battles
Christian
one at a
atheist.
time.
He was sitting with his disciples, right?
And then you bring him in.
They were having discussions about many things, maybe. Doesn't
Trying to
matter.
get him to believe
A
he's an Israelite.
Canaanite woman, a woman from Canaan, land of
He's an
Canaan,
Israelite.
came with her daughter.
Come as an Israelite.
Are you Israelite, bro?
And the daughter
No,
is
I'm
not well.
asking him. If he's going to read the Bible,
And
read
she
it
started,
correctly.
I'm paraphrasing the story, it's a well-known story. And she's saying to Jesus Christ, Master, help me, help my child.
Matthew 28, verse 9, it says, as they went to tell his disciples, behold, Jesus met them, saying, rejoice. So this is Jesus talking. So they came, held him by the feet, and worshipped him. And then Jesus said to them, do not be afraid, go and tell my brethren to go to Galilee, and where they will see me.
Yes, they worship.
They worshipped him.
Did you hear what we've read?
So they worshipped him.
I asked
We read
you
the Bible.
to tell them or ask them,
Jesus was
It doesn't say
worshipped.
that.
Excuse me, please.
It doesn't say that.
Would you like
It
to-
say the
okay.
Bible?
where
Worship Jesus.
does it say in the
I just
Bible,
read it. He worshipped
without
Jesus.
any ambiguity, that Jesus claims and says,
What?
I am God and
No one
worship
said.
me?
No one believes.
Can you not interrupt me?
Do you believe God?
In the name of
No,
my Father.
please.
Yes, he's not God, is he? Do you believe?
No,
he's
another one,
He's
bro.
not
Another
God.
one.
What are you making
So
that point
another
for?
one.
When I
He's
asked
not God.
a specific
Why are you making
question,
that point?
for
Matthew,
example,
again.
No, but another
if I
one.
make a claim,
Hold on.
I am the
Listen.
professor.
You're wasting
All
daylight
the
time.
videos here, don't edit none of this.
You're wasting
So did all the
daylight
prophets.
time.
Look, Matthew 2,
They come in the
No
name
one
of God.
believes.
Matthew
what Jesus is
2:11.
God.
So as you realize,
Yes.
they know
Mansyur,
very
can I
well.
read this?
There is no Bible
Mansyur, can I read
verses
this?
Read it loud.
at all
Loud voice.
in which
Matthew 2:11.
it ever
Yes, read.
And when they
describes
come into the
Jesus'
house, they
claim
saw
that
the
he
young
was
child
God.
with Mary,
But
his
if we
mother,
go to the Old
and
Testament,
fell down and worshipped him.
That is
When they had
everywhere, in
opened their
almost
treasures,
every book,
they presented
God,
gifts to
real God,
frankincense and myrrh.
I am God.
And they worshipped him.
Just as you expect from God to say.
Right.
They worshipped him.
In the Old
Wrong
Testament.
again, my
So,
friend.
You got it wrong, Mansyur. They worshipped him.
as you realize, the red herring argument.
They worshipped Jesus.
Do you see the red herring?
Kryptonite.
If I ask you, what is your name? And you say, I live in London. I say, look, but I'm asking your name.
Not
He
use
says, I live in
semantics.
London.
Semantics
This
don't
is a
work.
red herring argument, right?
Right.
I ask you one question.
Tell us the
Ma-
origin.
and you answer another.
Matthew 14,
Yeah, read it.
33.
Loud voice.
This is the third one now.
Read it loud.
Then those who were in the boat came and worshipped him,
Yes.
saying, truly,
Where is the
you
claim
are the
Jesus
Son of
says-
God.
He didn't say God.
This is the Bible.
You.
Just one second.
This is three verses that I've given
Come
you.
here.
They all
Moment of
worshipped
pause,
him.
right? Moment of pause from you, right? The verse that you quoted. Now, in the verse,
quoted three verses.
The last one. What we have heard Did we find? Inshallah, we have to go and pray now. But I just want to reflect this moment.
Mansour, don't be...
Excuse me.
You're not being fair here. You're saying things that's not true.
Excuse me. What you've heard from what you've quoted?
What he's saying is not the truth.
Did you hear the words Jesus is saying? I am
Bible
God
saying
and
they
worship.
worshipped him. Look, read it.
This is
They
your
worshipped him.
desperation
His disciples
to find something in the Bible for their belief which is not even
They worshipped him
substantiated
3 times. Matthew 14.
So I ask you kindly,
Matthew 14, 30.
as you are an intelligent woman,
Matthew 14, 33.
intelligent woman,
They worshipped him.
to read the Quran.
Shouting is not going to help.
Read about the biography of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam
Get this on
and
camera.
discover for your own self
33.
who is worthy of worship. Is it not the God that Quran describes that worship Allah alone, which your heart and your mind would agree? So let's limit to that because we have to go and pray. We pray at right time. We have to go and pray as my sheikh is already here. So, I would thank you sincerely from my heart, inshallah, that God guides us all, guides you and guides me to worship Him alone.
God guides us.
So you take care
And Allah misguides you.
pleasure of us to speak to you. Yep, speak to you, and we'll speak again perhaps. Okay?
Can Allah misguide you?
Okay, you take care.
Mansour, can Allah misguide you?
Okay.